The message came at 2:13 a.m., a time when the world feels thinner, more fragile. I'd been staring at my ceiling, wrestling with insomnia, when my phone vibrated against the nightstand. The glow of the screen illuminated a single text from an unknown number. "We know what you can do. Come to where you belong." Beneath the text was an address, an estate I didn't recognize, nestled deep in the woods outside the city. My heart pounded as I reread the message. What I can do felt like an accusation, yet also an understanding. They knew. For as long as I could remember, I'd felt different. It wasn't something tangible, but moments when my intuition was too sharp, when I could sense the undercurrents of emotions in a room, or know what someone would say before they said it. I'd buried these experiences under the weight of logic, convinced they were coincidences or tricks of the mind. But the text made them feel real, validated, and exposed. Against my better judgment, I found myself typing a response. "Who are you?" The reply was instant. "You'll find out when you arrive." The dread should have stopped me, but instead, curiosity tightened its grip. By morning, I was driving toward the address, my old sedan rumbling against the gravel road that wound through towering pines. The estate appeared like a phantom, its iron gates creaking open as if expecting me. The building beyond was a sprawling relic, its dark stone facade weathered and foreboding. Gargoyles perched along the roofline, their grotesque faces catching shadows from the overcast sky. A woman greeted me at the door. She was tall and elegant, with sharp features and an unsettling calmness in her eyes. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "We've been waiting for you. How do you know about me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "All will be revealed," she replied, stepping aside to let me enter. Inside, the air was heavy, scented faintly with burning wood and something metallic. The hallway stretched ahead, its walls adorned with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow me as I walked. Footsteps echoed faintly from somewhere deeper within, though I saw no one else. "This way," the woman said, guiding me to a grand sitting room where several others had gathered. They looked as uneasy as I felt, their conversations low and fragmented. The woman gestured to an empty chair. "We'll begin soon." "Begin what?" I wanted to ask, but the question died in my throat. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into a web, one I couldn't escape. The first hint that the estate was more than it seemed came that evening. We were seated around an enormous table in the dining hall, the flicker of candelabras casting long, quivering shadows on the walls. The meal was extravagant, yet no one touched their plates. Tension hung in the air, heavy as the ornate chandelier above us. I studied the others. There was Elise, a wiry woman whose sharp eyes darted around the room as if searching for exits. Across from her sat Malik, broad-shouldered and calm, but his tightly clenched jaw betrayed him. Then there was the boy, barely a teenager, staring intently at his plate as though it held answers. "I know you're all wondering why you're here," the woman from before said, her voice slicing through the silence. She stood at the head of the table, her posture as rigid as the ancient columns flanking the room. "You've each felt it," she continued, her gaze sweeping across us. "The abilities within you, the gifts that set you apart. This place will help you understand them, and more importantly, control them." "What if we don't want to stay?" Elise asked, her tone sharp. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You'll want to stay. In time." That was when it started. A low hum, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the room. The lights dimmed slightly, and the air took on a strange weight, as though it had thickened. I felt it then, a pulling sensation deep in my chest. My skin prickled, and for a moment, the room blurred, replaced by a vivid image of Elise gripping her fork tightly, her knuckles white. I blinked, and the image was gone. But when I glanced at her, she was holding her fork exactly as I'd seen. "What is this?" Malik growled, his voice cutting through the unease. "The estate amplifies what is already inside you," the woman explained, her voice eerily calm. "It will bring your abilities to the surface. You'll learn to wield them here, or they will consume you." As if on cue, the boy gasped. His hand trembled, and a faint golden light emanated from his fingertips, flickering like a dying flame. He stared at it, his face pale with fear. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "You can't stop it now," the woman said, her tone almost sympathetic. Around me, the hum grew louder, vibrating through my skull. My thoughts became sharper, each one cutting like a shard of glass. I could sense the emotions in the room with startling clarity. Fear, confusion, anger. But beneath them all, from the estate itself, there was something else. It wasn't alive in the way we were, but it was aware. Watching. Waiting. My chest tightened. Whatever we'd stepped into, it wasn't just a retreat. It was a trap, one that wouldn't let us leave without taking something in return. The estate felt different the next morning. The light filtering through the tall windows was dim, as if the sun itself had been muffled. Shadows pooled in the corners, unnaturally dark and unyielding. The hum I'd felt the night before was still there, faint but persistent, like a distant chorus just out of reach. I walked the halls trying to ignore the gnawing unease in my chest. The walls, lined with ornate tapestries and gilded mirrors, seemed to shift subtly when I wasn't looking. I turned a corner and found Malik standing at the end of the corridor, staring at a painting of a dense forest. "Does it look different to you?" he asked without turning around. I stepped closer, studying the painting. The forest depicted was impossibly detailed, each tree rendered with painstaking precision. But there was something off, an unnatural depth, as though the forest wasn't just painted, but real, captured and contained. "It's just a painting," I said, though I didn't believe it. "Look closer." I leaned in, and for a moment, I swore I saw movement. A branch swayed, and a shadow darted between the trees. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Malik turned to me, his eyes dark with suspicion. "This place is alive, isn't it?" I didn't have an answer, but the estate seemed to provide one. The hum grew louder, resonating through the walls. A door creaked open behind us, revealing a stairwell spiraling downward. "We shouldn't," I said instinctively. But Malik was already moving. The stairwell led to a dimly lit basement, the air thick and cold. The walls were rough stone, damp to the touch, and the floor was lined with tiles that seemed to pulse faintly underfoot. At the center of the room was a table, its surface etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly. Elise was already there, standing at the table with her arms crossed. "Took you long enough," she said, though her usual sharpness was dulled by unease. "Did you feel it too?" Malik asked. She nodded. "The estate wants us here. But why?" Before anyone could answer, the glow from the table intensified, casting the room in an eerie light. Symbols I didn't recognize danced across the surface, shifting and rearranging themselves as though alive. The boy's voice startled us. He was standing in the doorway, his small frame silhouetted against the light. "It's showing us something," he said softly. As the symbols stabilized, an image formed, a map. It was of the estate, but it didn't match what I'd seen above. The layout twisted and coiled like a labyrinth, with passages that seemed impossible. At the center was a pulsing red mark, almost like a heartbeat. "What's there?" Elise whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think," the boy said, "it's where the estate wants us to go." The path the map revealed was unlike anything we could have imagined. We followed the corridors, but they didn't lead where they should have. Each turn twisted back on itself, Each doorway led to places we'd never seen before. "It's playing with us," Elise muttered, her voice sharp with frustration. "This place isn't real. It's shifting," I finished for her. The estate wasn't just alive, it was aware, reshaping itself to guide us toward the center. The hum grew louder as we walked, vibrating through the walls and floors until it felt like it was inside us. Finally, we reached a door unlike the others. It was made of polished black wood, inlaid with silver symbols that glowed faintly. The boy hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. "We have to go in," Malik said, though his voice betrayed his own fear. The room beyond was vast, far larger than the space should have allowed. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with mirrors that reflected endlessly. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and atop it sat an object that pulsed with the same faint red light we'd seen on the map. It was a crystal, jagged and dark, its surface shimmering as though it contained an entire galaxy. "What is it?" Elise asked, stepping closer. "It's connected to us," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I didn't know how I knew, but I could feel it. The crystal was tied to our abilities, amplifying them, feeding off them. As we approached, the mirrors began to ripple, and our reflections shifted. They didn't mimic our movements, but moved of their own accord, watching us with eyes that gleamed faintly. "This is wrong," the boy whispered, clutching my arm. "We shouldn't be here." The hum grew deafening, and I felt a pull, like invisible hands drawing me toward the crystal. It wasn't just power. It was need, raw and insistent. Malik reached out, his hand trembling. "Maybe if we—" "Don't touch it," Elise shouted, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. His fingers brushed the surface of the crystal, and the room erupted in light. The mirrors cracked, and the reflections stepped forward, their faces twisted into grotesque parodies of our own. "What's happening?" Elise screamed, backing toward the door. The reflections didn't answer. They simply stared, their eyes burning with the same red light as the crystal. And then, as the hum crescendoed, they began to whisper. Each word cut through the air like shards of ice, their voices overlapping in a chilling harmony. The estate wasn't just amplifying our abilities, it was feeding off them, growing stronger with every passing moment. The crystal pulsed again, and I felt something shift deep inside me. The estate wasn't just alive, it was consuming us. "We need to leave," I said, my voice firm despite the terror clawing at my chest. But as the reflection stepped closer, blocking the door, I realized the estate had no intention of letting us go. The reflections advanced, their movements deliberate and unnatural, like marionettes on unseen strings. Each step echoed in the vast chamber, the sound hollow yet oppressive. Their faces, our faces, twisted into expressions we'd never worn, their eyes glowing with the pulsing red light of the crystal. "We're trapped," Elise whispered, her back against the wall. The fractured mirrors cast distorted images around her, creating a labyrinth of shifting, splintered versions of herself. "No," I said, though the word felt fragile. "There has to be a way out." The boy clung to my side, trembling. "It's testing us. It's been testing us the whole time." "Testing us for what?" Malik asked, his voice strained as he stared at his reflection. It grinned at him, a wide, toothy smile that didn't reach its gleaming eyes. "For control," I said, the realization striking like a cold wind. "It wants to see if we'll give in, to our abilities, to the power it's offering." The crystal pulsed again, the light rippling outward like a heartbeat. The pull intensified, a magnetic force tugging at something deep within me. My thoughts blurred, replaced by the overwhelming desire to reach out, to touch the crystal, and claim whatever it held. But the whispers returned, sharp and urgent. They weren't coming from the reflections anymore, but from the estate itself. A chorus of voices warning me, pleading with me. "You'll lose yourself," they seemed to say. "Like the others before you." I fought to focus, to resist the pull. The crystal's light grew brighter, and I realized the reflections weren't advancing. They were waiting, watching. "Don't look at them," I said, my voice trembling. "They're not real." "They feel real," Elise said, her voice barely audible. "They're what we could become," the boy said suddenly, his small voice cutting through the tension. "If we let it take us." The air grew colder, and the room seemed to contract, the walls pressing in as the whispers grew louder. The crystal's glow became blinding, casting long, jagged shadows that danced across the room. "We need to break its connection to us," I said, though I had no idea how. Malik stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the crystal. "If it's feeding on us, then maybe we can cut it off. Starve it." "How?" Elise asked, her voice tight with fear. Malik hesitated, then closed his eyes. "We stop giving it what it wants. We stop letting it use our power against us." The idea seemed impossible, but it was all we had. I nodded, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. I focused on the pull within me, the part of me that the estate was feeding on. It felt like a thread, taut and vibrating, connected to the crystal's endless hunger. One by one, the others followed. Elise's breath steadied, and Malik's hands unclenched. The boy gripped my arm tightly, his small frame shaking, but his determination was palpable. The crystal pulsed erratically, its light faltering. The reflections froze, their movements halting as though they were marionettes whose strings had been severed. The hum in the air wavered, then began to fade. "It's working," Elise whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The crystal emitted a final, desperate flash of light, and the room was plunged into darkness. The hum was gone, replaced by a deafening silence. For a moment, none of us moved, too afraid to trust what we'd done. When the faint glow of the crystal returned, it was dim and muted, its pulse slow and weak. The reflections were gone, the mirrors around us cracked, but empty. "We did it," Malik said, his voice hoarse. But the boy tugged at my sleeve, his eyes wide. "We have to leave now. It won't stay weak forever." The door we'd entered through reappeared, its black wood gleaming faintly. Without hesitation, we ran, the oppressive air of the estate pressing against us as if trying to hold us back. The corridors twisted and turned, but the estate no longer fought us. We reached the grand hall where we'd first arrived, the front doors wide open, revealing the cold night beyond. We didn't stop until we were outside, the fresh air biting at our skin. The estate loomed behind us, its windows dark and uninviting. For a moment, I thought I saw movement in one of them, a shadow shifting just out of sight. "What happens now?" Elise asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer. The estate had let us go, but I could feel its presence lingering, a faint hum at the edge of my senses. "We keep moving," I said finally, "and we don't look back." As we walked away, the estate stood silent and still. But deep within, the crystal's faint pulse continued, waiting for the next to fall into its trap.